All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're about to dig up a piece of pro football history that's been, well, it's pretty much been completely forgotten. We're talking about the wild, one-season story of Washington, D.C.'s very first professional football team.
So when you think of Washington football, your mind probably jumps to the team that showed up in the 1930s, right? But what if I told you there was another one, a full decade earlier, that just vanished, almost as fast as it appeared? Let's find out what happened.
Yep, they were called the Washington Senators. And their story? Man, it's just a perfect little time capsule of how chaotic, unpredictable, and honestly just plain bizarre the early days of pro football really were.
Okay, so to really get what was going on with the Senators, you've got to understand the league they were in. This wasn't the NFL yet. This was the APFA, the American Professional Football Association. And you can basically think of it as the Wild West of pro football. Seriously.
So picture this. It's 1921. A bunch of businessmen get together and think, hey, you know what DC needs? A pro football team. Which was a pretty ambitious idea because back then the heart of pro football was way out in the Midwest, not in the nation's capital. All right, let's run through the key facts real quick. They pop up in 1921, playing in the APFA. The guy in charge is Tim Jordan. But look at that folded date. They were in the big leagues for just one single season before kind of fading away and then officially calling it quits 2 decades later. And that one year, hoo boy, it was something else.
And believe me, the weirdness started right out of the gate. The team signs this guy, Harry Courtney, but he's got a, let's call it a conflict of interest. See, his day job was pitching for the other Washington Senators, the city's baseball team.
Yeah, you can imagine that didn't go over too well with his baseball boss, the owner Clark Griffith. He basically laid down the law. Listen, you either quit football or you're going to find yourself without a job in baseball. Courtney, well, he chose baseball. And just like that, his pro football career was over before it even got off the ground.
So let's dive into that one and only season they had in the APFA, because it was just an absolute roller coaster of high drama and some truly strange events. Their first official game was a huge test. They were up against the Canton Bulldogs, who were, no joke, one of the best teams in the entire country. Washington's game plan was pretty clever, though. They had 2 things going for them. First, their linemen were a little heavier on average. And second, and this is the sneaky part, they signed 3 former Bulldogs players, hoping they could spill some secrets and give them an edge.
So, how'd that work out for them? Yeah, not so great. The Bulldogs just shut them out cold, 15-0. A really rough start for the new team from DC.
But if you think that was bad, things were about to get a whole lot weirder. Their very next league game was scheduled against the Rochester Jeffersons, and it just spiraled into total chaos before a single snap.
Okay, so a big snowstorm hits Washington. Rochester's manager takes one look at the field and says, no way. It's way too dangerous to play. But Washington's manager is like, hold on. We've got 400 fans who actually showed up in this weather, and our contract says the home team gets to decide if the field is playable. So you've got this standoff.
But here's the thing. This whole argument wasn't really about the snow. It was about cash. The contract guaranteed Rochester an $800 appearance fee, that number right there. And with such a tiny crowd, Washington just refused to pay up. Rochester, of course, said, no cash, no game. And that right there tells you everything you need to know about this era. It was just a constant financial struggle.
The aftermath was a total mess. At first, the ref just gave Washington a 1-0 win by forfeit. But then the league commissioner stepped in and overturned it. Washington never paid Rochester that $800, and to this day, the NFL doesn't even officially recognize that this game ever happened. Just pure early football chaos.
You know, amidst all that craziness, they actually did manage to get a real official win on the board. They beat the Cleveland Indians in a close one, 7-0.
Okay, but the real peak of their season, the main event, was the rematch. They were going up against their nemesis again, the mighty Canton Bulldogs. This was their big chance for redemption.
And then, right before kickoff, something unbelievable happens. A total betrayal. Washington had a deal all lined up to sign this All-American star from Penn State, Glenn Killinger, just for this one game. But at the absolute last second, Killinger doesn't just back out. He signs with Canton and suits up to play against them. Can you even imagine?
And this just perfectly lays out the absolute heartbreak of that game. Of course, Killinger immediately starts tearing them up, leading Canton to a quick 14-0 lead. But you know what?
Washington didn't back down. They fought all the way back to tie the game, 14-14. It was anybody's ball game, until that fateful fumble. You can see it right there. A late-game fumble by Gene Vidal gave Canton the ball, and that was it. They scored twice in the final minutes, and the game was over.
After a soul-crushing loss like that, the dream was pretty much dead. The team's short, wild ride in the national spotlight was basically coming to an end.
So their final official record in the APFA, 1 win, 2 losses. That landed them in 12th place in the league, and not surprisingly, they packed it in and left the APFA right after that season. They never came back.
Now, the team didn't just vanish into thin air. They actually stuck around, rebranded themselves as the Washington Pros, and kept playing as an independent club for a while. But their shot at the big time was over. They slowly faded out and then officially folded for good in 1941.
So why should we even care about this one-season wonder? What's the takeaway here? Well, it's because their story is basically the story of the entire early NFL in a nutshell. It was all about contract fights, last-minute backstabbing, and just trying to stay financially afloat. It was raw, unpredictable, and a million miles away from the polished corporate league we know today.
And it really makes you think, doesn't it? The 1921 Senators are just one team from one forgotten season. How many other wild, unbelievable stories from the early days of our favorite sports have just been totally lost to time?